Hey
Go
everyone,
ahead.
it's great to see so many of you tonight for this inaugural webinar, our shakedown cruise, you might say, of the Oregon Idaho Annual Conference Creation, Care, and Resilience team. My name is Bob Wilson, and I'm a member of this team, which was brought into being through a resolution passed at last summer's annual conference meeting in Salem, Oregon. This evening, I'm joining from Portland, Oregon, as a member of Portland First United Methodist Church. I wanted to briefly introduce the other team members, and while I do that, I would like to invite everyone to enter their name, where they're joining us from, and their home church in the chat. Okay, first up is our co-coordinator, Patty Sloan. She wears, among others, the hat of a newly commissioned Earth Keeper, and she worships at Salem First United Methodist Church. And joining us as well this evening is Jim Teicher, who chairs Planet Church, the Green Team, at Portland First. I also want to welcome Reverend John Pitney, a longtime pastor of Eugene First United Methodist Church, now joining us from Central Oregon. Unable to join us tonight, but a key member of our group is Louise Kinzel. She's the United Methodist Disaster Relief and Volunteers and Mission Coordinator. And were she able to join us, she would most likely have been coming in from Hermiston, Oregon. And last but not least, I wanted to introduce our group's indispensable advisor, Reverend Rashenda Fairhurst, a tireless advocate for creation justice across the United Methodist Connection. She is joining us from Ashland, Oregon. And she has also graciously agreed to start us off with an opening prayer. So I'd like to turn things over to Rashenda.
Thank you, Bob. Wonderful. Yes. So anybody who knows me knows that I love the Psalms and how full of creation they are. And since this is our inaugural conversation by Zoom, I'm going to start with a reading from Psalm 1 as our prayer. The truly happy person does these things. They love the Lord's instruction. They recite God's instruction day and night. They are like a tree replanted by streams of water, which bears fruit at just the right time, and whose leaves don't fade. Whatever they do succeeds. Amazing and wonderful God, bless this group today. Bless the work of the group and the work of creation, justice, and resilience in the Oregon Idaho Annual Conference. Amen.
Thank you,
And I think
Rashenda.
we'll
I
take
love that psalm. That was lovely. And now I would like to turn things over to Patty Sloan, who will lead us into this evening's webinar.
Thank you. I finally unmuted. Tonight's webinar is called Imagine a Thriving Creation. And we're at a very exciting time in Oregon and Idaho because they've asked us to form green teams. They've asked us to join in to become active and working in creation care. Tonight we're concentrating on pollinators. When we come together, we need to create leaders. We need to create within the congregation, not the pastor, but people who are willing to get involved to work on our planet. We need to have a sustainable knowledge base so we can implement the life-giving projects that we want to do. We need to build. We need to share. We need to share resources. We need to share breakthroughs. So together, I believe that Oregon and Idaho churches can do just more than study creation care, but we can use our powers to make it a transformative time in our conference, in our churches too, and in our homes. So let's make creation care a verb, not a noun, but a verb. So, Pastor John, would you introduce the Hayhoe video?
Yes, thank you, Patty. I'm John Pitney. I'm in Bend tonight. If you don't know Katharine Hayhoe's work, she's probably someone you want to look up. We're going to see a short clip of her speaking. She's an atmospheric scientist and evangelical Christian. Years ago, with her husband, a pastor, she wrote the book Climate for Change, Global Warming Facts for Faith-Based Decisions. In 2012, she was named one of Christianity Today's 50 Women to Watch. She was a lead author for the second, third, and fourth national climate assessments. She might be best known for her TED Talk, which was titled "The Most Important Thing You Can Do About Climate Change is Talk About It." She produces and publishes PBS's digital studio short series Global Weirding, Climate, Politics, and Religion, and she's received many awards. But about these awards, she says this: these are all tremendous honors, but what means the most to me personally is when just one person tells me sincerely that they had never cared about climate change before or even thought it was real, but now, because of something I said, they've changed their mind. That's what makes it all worthwhile. Here's Katharine Hayhoe.
Give me an idea what barriers we need to tear down.
I think you're perfectly right. It is poverty of imagination, because when we listen to what people have to say about climate change, even though it isn't very much, it's all about what an apocalyptic future we are heading towards that we must avoid.
Yeah.
And it's important to know that, but our human brain is not wired to move forwards unless we're moving forwards towards something that is better than what we have today.
Yeah.
So we are missing the story of what a better future looks like,
Mm-hmm.
what the path to that better future is, and what I can do to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I feel like communication is the climate solution that has not yet been unlocked, helping people understand, again, not just the head, but the heart and the hands, why it matters and what they can do. Because if we see ourselves in that better future, and if we realize that that is the better future we want for our children, for everyone else we love, then we're going to do everything we can to get there.
When the Lord really moved on me about creation care, and when that was pre-COVID, I had been working in other countries planting trees, but I was on the Camino and my hip went out, and so I was recuperating at home, and I was thinking about the trees I planted, and the Lord said, "Who's taking care of my? Why isn't the church taking care of my planet?" And I thought a lot about that, and so I started reading everything I could, and I started listening to everyone I could. And I went to different spiritual leaders and asked them for material, and they didn't have any. And so I felt very alone out there. And I really worked very hard to find material and to learn things. But what I didn't know, and what people didn't share with me, is how much the United Methodist Church has available for me, and how much material is really out there for us, and how strong their stand is for creation care. And we want to take that stand. We want to take the acts that they've taken and build on them individually, churches, continually, till we really form a strong body that makes a difference. We have made a resolution, then our general conference, that affirm creation care across the denomination. We have a divestment from fossil fuel in the Western jurisdiction and the denomination. We have creation care worship services, and we have worship series through our discipleship ministries. There's an open letter to the bishops that has resulted in fresh dialogue with the bishops about creation care in the local church. The last training saw 59 United Methodists trained as global ministry earthkeepers, with over 500 earthkeepers now trained in the denomination locally. Now, I listed those because, and I listed them very poorly and very fast, but I wanted you to know that the United Methodist Church stands firmly behind creation care, and they stand firmly behind you as we work together. So we're about sharing resources, about growing together, about sharing our ideas. So tonight, we brought to you my friend David. David Kollen is Xerces ambassador. And what a better way to address creation care than to introduce pollinators, those special creations of God that are disappearing and that we need to connect with. So David, we really want to hear from you tonight. So thank you so much for coming from Xerces Society and making a difference.
Okay, guess that's my cue to talk a little bit. So I'm down in Brookings, Oregon, way on the southwest coast. And I've been for, I guess this is my fifth year doing this ambassador work. And what I enjoy doing is going out and educating people, not only on the background of pollinators, but the details of conservation and how we can assess our local habitats to see whether they're good enough to help these creatures out. There's a lot of detail in all that. What I talk about tonight, we really won't go into conservation because there's not time, but it's going to be an introduction. And, at Xerces, pollinators has always been kind of, you might say, a gateway drug, to use that terminology. Everyone loves pollinators, but there are a lot of other things that are extremely important in our invertebrate world, and I'll talk a little bit about those too, because normally when people do take care of pollinators, they help a lot of other things they're not aware of. But as we go through, you'll see some of this. So with that, if I can get this silly thing to work correctly, I'm going to do a screen share, and off we'll go.
Looks great.
Okay, so most of you that were on earlier would have seen these quotes here, but I'll just give you, for those that maybe came in a little bit later, I like these quotes. And if you just maybe take a minute or something like that to read those, it just kind of sets a little bit of a background tone. So I think we can all agree with those points. So tonight I've titled this Stewardship of the Little Creatures. I want to talk just briefly about Xerces first. So we've been around for over 50 years, and our mission is invertebrate conservation. The group is named after the Xerces blue butterfly that you see in the bottom. That's the first butterfly documented to have gone extinct due to man-made activities, namely development on the San Francisco Peninsula, and last seen flying in 1943. So we work in four main areas: habitat creation, pesticide reduction, species protection, and then basic research into invertebrates and their ecology. We really work through partnerships for the most part. So whether it's local garden clubs, state, federal agencies, cities and campuses, that is what we do. This is how our modus operandi. Just one quick word. I'm not asking for a donation here, but I want you to take note of the Xerces.org. If you go on there, you can sign up for a free newsletter, and you can learn more about Xerces if you wish to do so after this presentation. So why would we have a whole organization dedicated to conservation invertebrates? Well, E.O. Wilson famously said they're the little creatures that run the world. And so let's move on and see if Dr. Wilson was correct or not. So there's different aspects to importance. One of those is diversity. This drawing is, if you look at the scale of these different animals, you can see that this beetle is far larger than anything else. And the reason is that there are more species of insects than any other animal on the planet. In other words, they make up the majority of animal species. Why do we really care about diversity? Because diversity is a key thing in resilience in ecosystems. That could be your backyard ecosystem, or it could be an ecosystem out in the natural areas. But diversity is a key element of allowing those ecosystems to adjust to insults, basically. Another thing that makes invertebrates so important is just the sheer amount of biomass. They are by far the largest biomass source of all the animals. What's another name for biomass? Food for someone. So invertebrates are part of nearly every food chain. There are some exceptions to that. Something like 95, 96% of songbirds at some stage are using invertebrates, mostly to raise their young. If you look at aquatic systems, a lot of fish, especially when they're juveniles, rely on macroinvertebrates of one kind or another. And then, why are you doing this to me? There we go. Sorry about that. And if we move up the food web just a little bit, then we encounter this grizzly bear. And the grizzly bear, well, it's eating salmon, which use macroinvertebrates as juveniles, and also eating berries, which rely on pollinators. There's decomposition. This is something that is really important for us. Something like 90% of the organic waste on the planet are recycled through some kind of an invertebrate, and it's really important to get those nutrients back into the soil. Biocontrol. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but this quote on the top basically is saying the only reason we're not just totally overrun with insects is that they're at war with each other. One is food for another. And when populations get to be excessive for one species, you can always bet that there's something else there that's going to go and try and eat it. And just as an example, if you look at the second picture from the left, this is a larva of the lady beetle at the far left. And they love eating aphids. So all of these things are helping us out whether we know it or not. And then finally, we can talk about pollination. Most plants require an animal pollinator of some kind, and these are primarily going to be insects. Now, why do we care? Well, let's look at plant reproduction. 85% of flowering plants require a pollinator. That's angiosperms. If you look at just all plants on the planet, 2/3 of those require a pollinator of some kind. Now, that's a really important role. You could imagine if we lost 2/3 of our plants. If we remember back to the days we were in school, we know that the job of plants is to capture energy from the sun and move it out into food webs. And that's done in ways like this. Now, there's a figure that's used. 1 in 3 mouthfuls of food and drink we consume require a pollinator. And that's, it's going to vary obviously with diets and such, but that's a good starting point. 1,200 crops globally. Whole Foods some years back up in the Portland area did a demonstration for customers. This is a produce department, as it normally is. And this is what it looks like when they removed items that required a pollinator. And you can see there are a lot of empty spaces there. They did the same thing in the dairy area. And this is a before and an after, and you can see a lot of empty shelves. If it's not obvious, the reason for this is alfalfa, which is fed to a lot of dairy cattle. And alfalfa needs to be started from seed when farmers go through rotations, and seeds require pollinators. So if we really think about it, this requires pollinators. We've got cocoa at the bottom, that chocolate, and we've got the dairy products and some strawberry on the top. So this is a pollinator required item. Pollinators support other wildlife. So if you look in the animal kingdom, there are a lot of animals that use mostly, say, smaller ones, but they use fruits and seeds. Even grizzly bears eat things like moss. And, obviously sometimes the pollinators become a snack. And we get some cultural benefits from our pollinators. Now I want to talk a little bit about pollinator diversity. There are 6 main groups of insect pollinators. So what we have here is a butterfly, a moth, a fly. This is a wasp. There's a bee and a beetle. So these are representatives of these 6 groups. But there's only 2 of those that intentionally are gathering and transporting pollen. This is really important. They're not accidentally getting pollen on them. They're intentionally gathering it. So I'm going to concentrate really on the bees later on, because although wasps, there are a few wasps that are pollinivores, they call them. There's only about 250 species in the world, and they don't play a big part. I want to briefly talk about some of the natural histories of these. And for those of you that are not familiar with the term natural history, it just means, how do they make a living? How do they survive? What do they do? So lepidopterans, that's a term we use for butterflies and moths. Something like 180,000 species. Maybe 75% of these are thought to be pollinators. Lepidopterans, unlike bees and wasps, they don't make nests. What they do is they find a host plant and they lay eggs either on or near that host plant. So this concept of host plants is something that's, as you get into the conservation stage of things and you're doing things actively, it's an important concept. Probably the best example of that, and I'm sure most of you are familiar, if not all of you, would just be monarch butterflies and milkweed. Milkweed is the host plant for monarch butterflies, and butterflies can be very specific about what they'll use. And in the case of monarchs, it is only milkweeds. When it comes to fuel, nectar for the adults, they don't really care what flower, as long as it's got some nectar for them. Now, I want to go back to this picture here. These caterpillars. So caterpillars transfer more of that captured sunlight into the food web than any other animal on the planet. Any of you that have, oh gosh, I'm going to blank out here. I'll think of his name. Doug Tallamy. Any of you that are familiar with or read his books would know this. And just as an example here, they did a study in North Carolina, and they looked at a pair of chickadees, like, sun up to sundown. They required 10,000 caterpillars to successfully raise their chicks. We look at bees, there's something like 20,000 species in total in the world, 4,000 species in North America. Here in Oregon, we have maybe 800 different kinds of bees. And really, all bees are effective pollinators, with the exception of a few that have kind of a parasitic lifestyle. So they avoid the heavy work of collecting pollen. Let's just put it that way. So they're most important for a couple of reasons. Mainly, as I said earlier, they're collecting and transporting pollen, as you can see on this bumblebee. It's that orange area on the back. And then they also have this trait called flower constancy, which means that when they're out collecting pollen, they tend to go to the same kind of plant on a trip, and that ensures the pollen gets to the right place. Now, honeybees. When we talk about conservation, really we talk about conservation of native bees, and it's important because invasive bees, and honeybees are from Europe. They're not invasive per se, but the colonists brought them over. When we look at things that aren't here natively, then they're already not going to probably interact with our ecosystem the way our native bees do. So our concentration is on our natives. Most of these natives are solitary bees, something like 90%. They're really gentle. If you approach one on a flower, it's going to fly away. The only time you're going to get stung is if you accidentally squeeze one. If you look at some of the diversity of these bees, this photoshopped picture is to scale. So this small bee is called a fairy bee, and the large one is a carpenter bee. And you can see there's, just a tremendous difference in size here. In terms of the looks and the coloration and things, you can see in the pictures to the left, just, a wide array. Now, these are not scaled for size, so some of these are quite a bit, larger than some of the others, but you can get an idea of, just some of the diversity that's out there. I want to talk a little bit about the solitary bee life cycle, since they're, most of our bees. So this is a case of single mother does all the work. So after this female is mated, she is going to go, this is a mining bee, she nests in the ground. She's going to go and create a nest, she dig a burrow, and then she's going to gather pollen. You can see that ball on the right. She's going to lay an egg on that. After 1 to 3 weeks, the first larva is going to come out. There'll be multiple stages of larva. And then finally, the last stage is going to go and spin a cocoon around itself. And then wait in the ground for maybe 7, 8 months, 9 months even. And then the cycle is going to start over again. By the way, that female is only going to be alive for usually 3 or 4 weeks. So 70% of our bees are ground nesters. And normally it looks like a little anthill. In the picture that you see, there's an aggregation of individual nests. So you can see there's a lot more of these little anthills. If you were to look underneath, you'll find a burrow entrance, and you can have some really elaborate architectures as part of these nest sites. The 30% of our bees are cavity nesters, so you might find them nesting in old beetle tunnels in deadwood. Certain plants have got stems that are amenable to these bees making nest, and they make individual cells, you can see in that top picture, and they work from the inside and work their way to the front of that stem. On the bottom, they can be very resourceful. On the bottom there, that's a sidewalk crack that was underneath a carpet. And a bee decided, hey, that looks like a pretty good place for a nest. Those of you that are wondering about the colors on that center right picture, this is where they come from. These bees actually line their nest with flower petals. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the threats that these insects, not just bees, but invertebrates in general, are facing. And one way to look at that is it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. We're not going to go through these because we don't have time, but I've circled in red the ones that are kind of associated with climate warming in some way, climate change, I should say. And then you've got all these others here. If we look at the top ones, right up there at the top would be habitat loss. Pretty obvious. I don't think I need to explain much about that. Another one of the big two would be pesticides. In the US, we apply more than 1 billion pounds of pesticides per year. And one of the real shames is that a lot of these pesticides are applied in kind of urban, suburban yards, and the main reason for that is so the yard looks pretty. And I think sometimes people don't recognize that, some of these can be persistent chemicals. They can get on their kids, they can get on their pets, they can get in the waterways, and all of those things are bad news. As an example here, this is a systemic pesticide, and I'm going to use the term systemic. Some people talk about neonicotinoids, but systemic is a more general term that includes neonics. And this happened, some of you will remember this. This is up in Wilsonville, 2013, during pollinator week, if I'm remembering correctly, ironically. Some linden trees had been injected with a systemic, and over 2 weeks, 100,000 bumblebees died because of that. And then the final threat I'm going to talk about is climate change. Now, this is really complicated. It's just a mosaic of interactions and problems, and there's no way to even, begin to start getting into this in this short period of time here. But what these pictures are to convey is that, if you look on the left, when you're talking about climate change, normally you're talking about these longer term events. So, after years, decades, you get more and more droughts and you lose areas. And then on the right, because of the excess energy in the atmosphere, you end up with these really weird short-term events. And in a lot of ways, they're worse because animals do not have a chance to adapt, right? It's not 10 or 20 years. It's like 2 weeks. And if these happen, local populations of any kind of creatures can just get wiped out. And you just have to hope that they can be restored again through other source populations that are close by. So we've got these threats, and what do we get? Declines, declines, declines. And, if you're, say you don't trust these scientists and you think maybe they got things wrong, well, then I would advise that you run an experiment of your own and go get in your car, go drive an hour or two through the countryside, and then look at your windshield, and then think back and try to remember what that would have been like if you had done that 20 or 30 years ago. So we don't need science papers telling us what's happening. We just need to be observant, and we can see that for ourselves. I want to point out that Xerces.org, again, there's just a ton of resources on here. I normally have 3 or 4 slides to talk about some of these things, but they're all free. They're downloadable. On the right is a really good book, and there are other Xerces books. What I didn't say about Xerces is primarily a group of scientists, and they do science to the highest degree. And, I'm proud to be volunteering for this organization. And so these are great resources. And with that, I'll open it to questions. I'm going to stop my screen share here. If I can figure out how. If I can get my cursor back. There we go. How did I do on time? Did I overrun?
You did great. You did wonderfully. We got good time for questions. Thank you.
And it was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks.
We brought Dave in because we wanted to look at pollinators, and we wanted to look at what we could do around our churches to increase the pollination population. We want to see how we can replant and basically take out and put in plants that are better plants for our environment. And I think that he did a beautiful job of showing us that we are in a time of need. This isn't about, I don't know. This is where we can be the church. We are saving part of God's creation. And I think that we should take that very seriously. So at this time, we'd like to hear from you. Bob, do you think we can talk about this? We're unmuting.
Bob, you are muted. Yeah.
We're unmuting.
Right. Sorry about that. Well, I was just going to give a couple of minutes. I have a couple of other things that I'm interested in learning from this group, but I am wondering what folks might have to push David's way, what kind of questions they might have. And I have one actually, since I'm a member of a church that has done some work with pollinators, that has done some work with mason bees. And I'm wondering if you're working around Southern Oregon or around the state, whether you are seeing other faith communities that are doing some of that work, or if we're trying to gather together as part of our project, people who are doing this kind of work and other kinds of creation care work. Do you have
You,
any places that you've run into that
you
are doing a
know,
lot of that kind of work?
so the honest answer to that is no. The only, organization that comes to mind that I'm aware of, and it's not state-based, is there's a group, Young Evangelical Christians or Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. That's, I think, based back in the East. Um, I have, I've not been asked to give a presentation to any faith groups. This is the first time.
Thank you.
And I think, from my perspective, it's a really important um, avenue to try to affect some of the work that needs to be done. And I was thrilled when this request went into Xerces, and luckily it went my way. Um, so yeah, sorry I can't help you out with that, but that is the answer.
Well, that's sort of part of our job, at least as I see it, to gather, at least in our particular tradition, churches that are doing this and encourage them to do more. So thank you for that. It's like we've got a
Sure.
work cut out for us, it sounds like a little bit. And I guess one other question, then I'll shut up for a minute, is if a church were interested in tackling in turning over, there's a lot of grounds that are, acreage that's owned by churches. If they are interested in doing one thing on their property to help with the pollinator issue, do you have an idea for how they could do something to get started in that realm?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to say is it's not one thing, but it's not complicated either. So you've you it, I would love to talk about some of the other things in maybe another time here, but basically you got to support all the life stages. So a lot of people say, I'm planting flowers for the pollinators, and that's great. Okay, they need some extra food. Um, but gosh, there's, four life stages, and what do they need? Well, they need nesting sites, and they need overwintering sites and shelter and things like that that we don't normally think about. Now, it's not hard to build all those things into a landscape. You know, I sometimes do these habitat assessments as a training with groups where, we walk a ground or something like that and say, okay, well, here's some nice soil for ground nesting bees, and put a couple of these plants, and we're covering some of the stem nesting bees. Uh, you know, keep some of the leaves over the fall, sweep them under the bushes instead of raking them all out, because there are a number of things, lepidopterans and queen bumblebees for next year, and many, many invertebrates that are hiding in those leaves. And when you remove all of them, then you've lost that, So you have to go beyond thinking about flowers, and think about host plants. Remember those caterpillars, how important they are. Um, so you've got to learn to identify some of the host plants in your region. Xerces has got materials that show plant lists for different regions of the country, and there are icons that show which plants are important for which things, like beneficial insects, lepidopterans, specialist bees, which we haven't talked about because that goes another layer down. But yeah, so if you put in a good pollinator plant, it ends up, hey, some bees can't use that plant. So what are you going to do for them? They tend to be the ones that are maybe under more pressure anyway, because instead of being generalists and able to go out to a wide variety, they're kind of stuck with some things that they've got a special relationship with. So I'm going to stop because I have a tendency to just like run on. So
No, I
any
really appreciate this. Has been informative and inspiring at once, and you can't do better than that. But I'm going to stop for a minute and see if others that are on this webinar have some questions they'd like to throw your way from their own particular congregations or experience.
I see Patty and Vicky both have their hands up.
I'll ask a question. My son Tom and I serve on the shovel and rake gang at our church in Portland. And what we do is volunteer once a week to take care of the church grounds. Some of us have been trying to plant more native plants, but we would love one of your assessments. How can we set that up?
So what I do is training. I don't, this is, teach a man how to fish kind of thing.
Right.
So what I would, love to do is, we could do a webinar and go over a lot of this. Xerces actually has a guide for assessment in small areas, including residential, small office, and a church property would fit into that, where you go through and you basically give yourself a grade on how good is your habitat. And then there's ways to improve that score. And, it becomes this systematic process where you can go back, year after year if you want to, and see, are you improving? And it's kind of, opportunity for a continuous improvement loop. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't come up there. I've got family all over Salem area. But webinar is a lot easier to start with. Xerces staff is hard to get out because it's a real tight run ship. They just, they just don't have time to do these kind of things. But if you're interested in at least having like a webinar to talk about this stuff, I've done, a lot of presentations, sliced and diced in different ways for different groups. So Patty Patty and Rashenda both have my contact information. And so, I welcome any kind of request like this.
One thing that occurs to me is as we gather churches together after we get our project up and running a little longer, we might find some that are really interested in doing the grounds piece that, for insects and so forth. And maybe we could organize a little bit broader group of people to attend a webinar. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, when I talked to Patty initially, I have this tendency to kind of just run off with these big plans. And I say, okay, well, we could do one covering this and one covering that. But I'm, happy to participate in any way.
Wonderful.
I see Patty and then Vicky and then John with their hands up.
Unmute, Patty.
I really want to tell you how much I appreciate the Xerces material. I went to Xerces' office in Portland, and I walked out with a box of material for my church. I walked out with children's books in Spanish and English on pollinators. The materials they had were things that I would never be able to create or would take me for years to find. So I'm really thankful for Xerces and how they've directed me. I don't clean up my flower beds in the fall anymore, and I let everybody sleep there. It makes for a really long spring cleaning up, but I know that I have a lot of bumblebees that are going to come out and visit me in the spring. I'm really thankful that you're in every state, because this is Oregon and this is Idaho. And not only that, this is Oregon Valley, Oregon Desert, and then Idaho and all of its different climates. So we really appreciate the variety or the way we can contact Xerces. That's that's great for us. Thank you.
I think
So I was
Vicky
just, okay, oh, good, thank you. So I was just going to offer up some of my experience as a master gardener, studying some of these topics. And one thing you've got to be aware of, and sometimes it's hard for people because we are taught to make our gardens nice and neat and tidy, lots of grass, English style, traditional lawns kind of thing. And that's not what pollinators like. That's not what insects like. That's not what wildlife likes. All the things that you see in native lands, where things are messier, that's what you've got to start replicating. And our native pollinators need native plants. They evolved, they co-evolved with those native plants. And so if you're planting something that's a cultivar or a hybrid or something that has beautiful flowers that are so complex, a lot of our pollinators can't reach that. If you're building for beauty, often, or human beauty, often the pollinators are not going to like that as much. And so, and the other thing I'll just say, if I've had two things, it's, plant native and then don't use pesticides, don't use herbicides. Watch what you're using on your lawns. A lot of stuff goes into those lawn products that are very, very toxic to insects in general. So it's a change of behavior, and it's a change of accepting things that are not quite so tidy. And that sometimes I think is the hardest. But remember, our insects live underground and in trees and stems and all that kind of stuff for 3/4 of their lives. They come out, they live for a few weeks. And then I'll say one more thing. Sorry, I'm going on my diatribe here, but honeybees outcompete a lot of our native insects, and native pollinators. And honeybees get fed by their beekeepers year round. So there's a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to plant things and I see a honeybee. Yes, that's great, but it's not really helping our native pollinators. So it's a little bit of an adjustment, because a lot of people don't even know that our European honeybees are not native. And I'll just be quiet. Thank you. This was wonderful. I love the Xerces Society. I worked with them throughout my career, and they are just top notch.
John, I think you're up next.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. That was great. Great information. While we were talking about it, I just wanted to mention, I put it in the chat, that I know of 3 congregations in Oregon that are really quite incredible on their grounds. Have done extensive restorations, including pollinator plantings, and those are St. Andrew Lutheran in Beaverton and our United Methodist Church in Corvallis, and the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Oregon here in Bend. So, and I think partly I'd say that because it's part of why we're making an effort to get together, is that we don't know what other congregations are doing unless we know what other congregations are doing. One of the challenges, but adventures of doing something like we're talking about right now, is finding those places and congregations who have things going on, and what a better way to learn how we might work on our own properties, but by visiting those other sites. And they're, of course, not always going to be United Methodist.
Any other questions, David? Well, is it okay if I ask a couple of questions to the group assembled? One of the things that we are hoping to do as the Oregon Idaho Creation Care and Resilience team is, as John just said, to figure out what is going on. And so one of the ways that we have set about to do that is to create a questionnaire, a form where people can log in and let us know what you're doing and what you want to do. And so if we can certainly talk about that at the moment, or you can log in. Shanda, are you going to place some links in the chat in a bit, including
So I
the
just
one to our...
Yes, and I
Uh,
just popped that one in the chat. That's a short form, 4 questions. That's it. Please share it, and then I'll pop some others as we do our final conversation.
So that's great. And so we would appreciate y'all and whoever you know that is interested in this work in churches around and about to get in touch with us so that we know what resources are out there, what resources people need, and so we can have a conversation about this as we proceed. So that would be great. Can I ask a question for people here? How many churches? I know that there's a limited number of churches represented here, but how many churches here have a green team? Is there a way to get a count there? I know some are from the church that I attend, and we have a green team. Other people I see, let's see, Casey Banks from Newburgh. I don't know if you have a green team. Can we figure out who's got a green team from this Zoom apparatus, Rashenda? Do you know?
People could raise their hand or just indicate by hand raising. Folks who are off camera can do a thumbs up or something like that as an indicator. Sometimes folks who aren't on camera are driving or something that makes it hard to interact though,
Sure.
so just
Okay.
on that.
Well, that's one of the questions that we sort of would like to uncover as we proceed in our work here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, what sorts of it's interactive, and we want to know what kinds of things you need from our team, what kind of things you can offer that we can spread around. So if it's not, it might be difficult to do in this setting, but please keep that in mind and please stay in touch.
I wanted to mention, I don't think it's mentioned earlier, we are recording this, and the information that's on the chat, that's going to be available to everyone afterwards. Isn't that right, Rashinda? Yeah. So don't worry about saving what's on the chat. We can email it out to you later.
Great.
And I think we also wanted to mention, didn't we, Bob, that we need more people working with us involved,
Absolutely.
and especially from Idaho, because
Correct, for sure.
we have a low representation from Idaho, and we want this to be a conference effort. So if you're interested in joining us, please let us know, because you can be
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
So one thing, just a question too, real quick, is for David and everyone here, is that the United Methodist denomination has put in their book of rules that we should be taking care of our church lands, not just taking care of it, but restoring them to natural systems and natural stewardship. And that's actually in the book of what we're supposed to be doing together. It's brand new as of 2024 that it's in the book of resolutions and book of discipline guide, United Methodists. I've got an article there about Kim Richmond, whose idea it was to write a resolution and bring it to general conference. It passed overwhelmingly. So when you're working with your congregations, and David, when you're working with other Methodists or people of faith, you can point to this and say, look, this is affirmed in community as something that's really important to do and deserving of our time and resources. So anyway, I just think that's fabulous. And so there's a link in the chat for that as well.
And you know it better than anyone, Rashenda, that there's a lot going on in the denomination across the country. So thanks for your work on that.
David, I hope we can really increase our relationship and really make a difference, help our churches, and then the material that we learn from our churches, we take home and change our neighborhoods. So thank you. I really appreciate you.
You're
Yes.
welcome, and thanks for inviting me to talk here.
Well, with that, then perhaps we're ready to close. And John, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to offer a closing prayer.
Can I jump in real quick beforehand? I'm
You
going to pop one more thing in the chat. I just want to introduce it. So the denomination also has a very active organizing group called the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And I'm about to pop links in the chat, and that's what those come from.
Thank you, Rashenda.
Wow. Very cool. This has been great. A good start for us. I invite you to kind of settle in and Listen to the sounds around you wherever you are. And hear these words of Hildegard of Bingen. I am the one whose praise echoes on high. I adorn all the earth. I am the breeze that nurtures all things green. I encourage blossoms to flourish with ripening fruits. I am led by the Spirit to feed the purest streams. I am the rain coming from the dew that causes the grasses to laugh with the joy of life. I call forth tears, the aroma of holy work. I am the yearning for good. And so as we go out together and look forward to another night and another new day tomorrow, I invite you to go in the yearning for good. The Spirit knows we need that yearning in our world right now. And as we go, made as we are in the image of God, it really makes us the yearning for good. We are the yearning for good. Mary Oliver says life is about three things. You know what they are? Some of you probably know this. Life is about three things. Number one, paying attention. Number two, being astonished. Number three, share your astonishment. Yeah, let this settle into your brain and share it with others. What's the first one? Pay attention. Be astonished. Share your astonishment. Pay attention. Be astonished. Share your astonishment. Go in peace, everyone. It's good to see your faces.
Thank you, John. Thank you all.